You're listening to Finding Your Genius Zone with Dirk Nevelle. With the help of successful individuals across industries, Dirk breaks down the unknown parts of every vocation while highlighting the importance of finding a career where you can leverage your natural skills, passions, and interests. Now here's your host, Dirk Nevelle.
Hello, everyone. This is Dirk Nevelle. Welcome to my podcast. On with me today is Jorge Pulido. Jorge, welcome.
Thank you, Dirk. It's a pleasure being here with you.
Yeah, I look forward. Jorge and I met not long ago, but he was one of those men that we were having dinner and some drinks. Our kids are friends, go to school together, and we just hit it off right away on many fronts. Everything from scuba diving to mindfulness to just, being great fathers and work. But, so I think 10 minutes in, I'm like, I need to have you on my podcast. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Jorge he has a very interesting background, very accomplished, very successful. He's been with Microsoft for a long time. Prior to that was with Disney, I believe HP as well. And also comes from Venezuela. So he has a lens that not many of us do, just coming from a different country and getting acclimated to our country, our careers, our world. So we'll touch on that. But Jorge, why don't you just kind of in your own words, tell the audience a little bit about what it is you do at Microsoft, what you've been doing, and kind of I know you're in the world of business development. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's an honor. I feel humble. And I wish, I had resources like this one that you're putting together when I was making my career choices a long time ago. So I think you're after something very powerful, very impactful. So thank you for that. And yes, I have to say that immediately I connected with Dirk in just, a few conversations. Immediately I knew from here, we're going to build something great, great friendship, and hopefully take it beyond that and hopefully impact many lives with this content. Yeah, answering your question, Dirk, lately I've been doing or performing a profession that's called business development. So for your audience, business development, it's used very broadly. So you will see the term business development in many places, and it's used interchangeable. And I will say it's even being abused the way that you use business development. And maybe people confuse that with being a seller or being a product manager. But very simple, business development, or a little more formal term, is more, how do you drive long-term inorganic revenue growth, profitable revenue growth, and at scale? That's pretty much in a nutshell what it is. And I could break it down for your audience. What does that mean? Well, Dirk, business development and driving that long-term inorganic growth is that every company is going to have, I will say, organic growth. If they continue executing, their revenue is going to grow over time because they're going to be reaching out more customers, they're going to be hiring more people, they're going to extending in territories, and that's the normal trajectory or the progression that a company will have. So then some of the company will have an organization that's called business development, and those are not sellers. They're not looking for short-term immediate results. They're more thinking how we can achieve something that accelerate instead of taking that curve of the revenue and doing more an inflection point where they take a more steep curve, and not just in the short term, but it's sustained over time. And they do it in a way that is scalable. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to use a very, very simple metaphor that has been used a long time, and I'm going to steal that from many authors, but I think it's going to be very illustrative for your audience. So imagine that a village, right, meets water. Imagine people, thinking about, okay, how do we bring water to a village where maybe there's a river far from the village, right? And then some people put together a group of, workers, and they start carrying buckets of water from the river down to the village. Of course, if they need more water, they need to hire more workers. And if they need to have water at night, they need to have workers working at night. Yeah. So instead of doing that, then imagine that you have another group of people thinking, how can I have something sustainable that scales and that can pretty much, achieve scale and bigger magnitude? So there's another group of people, instead of carrying a bucket of water, imagine that they build a pipeline from the river to bring water to the village. Of course, immediately you wouldn't see anything. All the citizens and all the people from the village say, what are these guys doing? And you see maybe a longer time of effort and work and study and think like, how do they bring the water from the river to the village instead of carrying the bucket of water? But once the whole pipeline is being built, then you have more water supply 24/7 with minimum effort. So more effort at the beginning, but once the water is flowing through the pipeline and gets to the village, then you don't need more people to bring those bucket of water, and then you have a sustained water stream flowing down to the village, and you can have water 24/7 and with very minimum support. So imagine that, but now include technology. So that's what I'm pretty much doing. Instead of carrying a bucket of water, I'm building pipelines to get the water from the river down to the village. But I do that with technology. Nowadays, it's hard to conceive a company that doesn't have technology involved in their core services. That's pretty much in a nutshell what I do.
Yeah, let me stop you, because that's what you really did, which I love, is you articulated maybe the difference between outside sales, which is more of a short-term kind of reactive, like I'm kind of in both in my industry, but the long-term strategic thinking. And I think it's important for the audience, if you're watching, it's a very long-term strategy, but at the end of the day, it's powerful, right? I mean, you change things in a drastic way. I guess in your analogy, I'm wondering what all the people that were carrying buckets do now.
Well, of course, that was a metaphor, but many people are doing that. And in particular, of course, you always need the transactional aspect of it, right? Yeah. Once and there are also grays in between. I just painted maybe two extremes of scenarios. Yeah. But it's not just like, either you're carrying bucket of water or you're building pipeline. Right. There's also a broad range in between. And when you have, technology, or you have any other source, it could be, lending, investing, or it can be another profession, right? It works in a different way. So doing business development can work in multiple areas. But when it's about a technology, it's and now with cloud computing, now you have SaaS solutions, so you have more revenue stream. But yes, in technology, you can have the analogy of carrying bucket of water or selling maybe software on premise. That would be one analogy. Sure. Versus maybe selling SaaS solution where you're paying a subscription or you're paying pay as you go. So the more that you consume, so there are multiple ways that you can monetize that. Yeah. But definitely the trend is more to have a relationship, less transactional and more ongoing, long-term drive. And the key word here is scale, right? You don't want to add more resources. You want to be competitive over time and to be able to scale and replicate your impact through maybe partners or other tiers or other sellers, so you can reach to locations and geos and industries that otherwise you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about someone like yourself in business development, and I'm thinking about the skill sets, the things that separate Jorge from other people. And if people are watching and they're thinking, I like this. This sounds more in line with who I am. What do you think the key traits and skill sets that you have that are conducive to the biz dev versus maybe more of an outside sales, quicker kind of thing? Like, are you just very strategic? Do you like to sit back, think about long term? Like, what is it? Why is it that you do so well in this environment?
I will give you two set of answers, Dirk. There's one philosophical angle to it. What I mean by that is that, first of all, the philosophical angle is that you have to be empathetic. You have to be empathetic with all the parties. When you're doing a partnership, when you're putting maybe two or more entities to work together, then to either check one of these 4 boxes, because you either want to achieve a new market, or you want to fill a gap in your product stack, or maybe you want to just learn. Sometimes you do a partnership in business development just to learn from a new business model, right? And that's one of the ways that you do maybe a commercial or a technical collaboration between the 2 parties to understand that third party. Or maybe you want to do also PR, and of course, all that to drive that, as I said, long-term profitable revenue growth. But definitely having that empathetic, I will say, being empathetic with all the parties and stakeholders involved, not only inside your organization, but also the inside the other parties' organization that you're partnering with, it's a key trait. It's important to constantly be aware and checking who's benefit from that partnership.
Yeah.
The other one that is more a tactical angle, it's more ensuring you have an executive sponsor, ensuring that you find and identifying synergies. That's a key trait. And I think that's where I bring a lot of value to the table, me and my team, where we identified how to connect the puzzle pieces, right? And of course, you mentioned that there's a lot of research. You have to study the industry, the competition. Internally, you have to self-assess and being very critical, because you might think, oh, everything's going great. Yeah, but then the thinking is how you can take that to the next level, always challenging yourself. So the mentality and the mindset that you have to have is, how do I take this to the next level? No matter where I am, how can I continue driving growth? And how can I continue driving efficiencies? How can I continue beating the competition? How I can better meet my customer needs? And doing that in a way that you can triangulate, right? And find those combination of inside value with somebody externally or some exogenous agent that you can bring into the equation, so you can then catapult or leapfrog on the value. So those are, I will say, key traits. And I think my background of understanding the end-to-end sales process and being an entrepreneur, running my own business, and being in so many organizations in a large company like Microsoft, Walt Disney, or Hewlett Packard has helped me to have that open mind and always curious intellectually to start looking for many angles in many aspects, like legal, marketing, operations, go-to-market, sales, product engineering. So all those type of organizations to see how can I tap into those resources to bring them together to realize value that otherwise wouldn't have happened organically.
Yeah, you said something curious, being curious. I would assume patience. A lot of people are wanting something quickly and they want to expedite. They're like, you have to have a long-term outlook, I believe. And then your ability to really interact with multiple divisions, different personalities, different groups, being likable. It seems like those are all really crucial components to being successful. And I know just from getting to know you, you have all those. I'm curious, is like thinking of a project, not to get specific, but when you take on a project, is this a project that you marry for a year and a half, 2 years, and then move on to a different project? How does the stickiness, like, I would assume that if you created something extraordinary, do you stay on it or do you move on to the next deal?
Great question, Dirk. And if you think about the life cycle, I'm going to address your question, just explaining to your audience what the typical life cycle is of a deal. Okay. So at first, you start maybe doing what I call the first phase, which is like you start doing a strategy analysis. Like, okay, what is it you're trying to achieve, right? So that's where you start at the very beginning. What's the strategy of your organization? What are you trying to achieve? Is that you want to achieve, increase of market share in a vertical, in an industry, or in a geo, or you want to launch a new product, you want to test it, or you want to partner with somebody else to, whatever that is, you have to have clarity of that goal that you want to achieve. You don't partner for the sake of partnering. And then once you do that initial strategy, then you have to secure approval for that strategy, right? Because in an organization, you don't work in a silo. You have to align to your key stakeholders, sales, marketing, product engineering. So you have to socialize what your strategy is and ensure you take input and feedback. For example, you don't want to have a strategy to penetrate a market with, let's say, a partner that then other organizations or the group have an orthogonal objective, or this one might be even a threat or misaligned to that one. So that's an opportunity to get feedback and align. That's the first phase. And that might take, let's say, it could be taking anywhere. And that's a lot of, I'll say, internal research, insight, but also hearing inputs and looking at trends and analysis and getting a lot of maybe surveys and talking to some people outside to get analysts, private equity firms, venture capital firms, or startups. It could be any activity just to gather that. Imagine that you're building a business case. That's what I call the initial strategy. It might take maybe 3 months, 6 months. And then after that one, then you secure the target. You start, okay, based on this strategy, you identify these are the top, I will say, bodies, entities, competitors, or potential partners that you want to partner with. And then you start prioritizing based on your strategy and based on doing the analysis of those companies. And then you start negotiating, knowing that you already have support to execute on that strategy. Then you have pretty much the backup. You have already the badge to go and start socializing, of course, with NDAs, and secretly. You don't want to vent or air out what you're trying to do. With NDAs, you try to touch those entities and pretty much gauge the interest of them to partner with you. And that might take another 6 months or 3 months. Okay. And after you get that negotiation pretty much nailed down, and you build what is called a term sheet, which pretty much outline the key terms of that relationship. Okay, I give you that, you give me this. This is how I'm benefit from this relationship. This is what I'm willing to do or to get. This is how I'm willing to invest. This is the risk that I'm willing to take. This is what I'm looking for, etc. And these are the key terms. Like, these are the non-negotiable things. These are maybe the boundaries. And that's what I call the approval to negotiate. Once we do that, you might be uncovering new terms and new things that might be out of the scope of the initial strategy. So you have to go back to your executive and then have what I call a final go, no go, which is then the third phase of ensuring that before I continue moving on, that's another opportunity to bring maybe something change externally, or maybe the company changes strategy. So that's an opportunity to ensure alignment with your strategy and your execution with the company. And once you have that approval, then you either tweak it and go back to your party, or you start then putting in paper and involving legal to have the final contract. You sign, and then you agree how you want to manage the relationship moving forward, because you want to ensure, in particular, business development have a role to guarantee or to look after those terms to ensure that whatever you said you will do, people are going to be continue executing, which what I call the funnels phase, which is governance. Okay, how do we ensure whatever we said and we discussed and we put in paper, people in organizations are going to be standing behind that. In particular, people go and come, or maybe this churn or executives leaving the company, or new people. So you want to make sure that you hold them accountable, both internally in your organization or outside, to ensure that you execute on those terms. And that's what I call the governance. And that governance, business development might be even involved there, depending on what terms were defined and who agreed to be doing and executing the governance.
Yeah, very interesting. You in your bio, you said something about running to the fire, right? And maybe you can elaborate on that. But like this whole process, that it sounds like it could take 1.5 years, 2 years longer. In that process, are there fires, like things that change and then you got to go back? And I mean, how would you define running to the fire?
Well, that's what Dirk, just for the audience, what Dirk is mentioning, that I have one slider.
Yeah. And I love it. I love it, by the way.
Yeah, just to explain your audience what that is that you're pointing. I think it's a good asset or artifact or tool to introduce yourself. Yeah. So there are multiple ways that you can introduce yourself. You can introduce yourself with maybe recording a video about yourself and maybe putting a podcast. This is who I am. You can maybe have your resume and saying, this is my branding and this. but in the other way, a little more informal and more personal, what I have done is I do a lot of coaching, and I love coaching people internally and externally, helping them precisely align to the purpose that you're going after, Dirk. Is I have one slider where I introduce myself. And in that slider, I said, this is my background, these are my values, this is what I have studied, this is what I enjoy, these are my beliefs. And one of that is, what are my management principles as a manager, as a leader? And I list out 5. So running to the fire is one of the 5 that I mentioned there. And running to the fire means that I like to work with people who go to solve the problem. Imagine a firefighter, they run to the fire, right? Because in the fire is where the problem is. And that's just a metaphor, an analogy to say where there's problem, even though the fire that you see maybe as a threat, sure, yeah, solving a problem is not fun. It's like when you see the problem, everyone wants to run away. I don't want to be in problems. But somebody who wants and is intrigued and is attracted to solve the problem, once you solve it, you're going to be rewarded. And if you see something that might be benefit the organization, or you see that you can drive attention and resources toward where there's a problem or an opportunity to tackle, and you solve that, generally you're rewarded. And that's a way to drive awareness and give you the sense of ownership that is very important for me. And I look at people that I surround by.
I loved it, and that's why I brought it up, because I'm like, even in my own world, in real estate lending, loans go, something happens. And I've always really been happy and excited when I'm working with a team that is all about solving the problem instead of like, whining about it, And so when you said that, I thought, what an important trait to have, especially in technology, because I would assume things come up often and you have to have the mindset of going after and trying to find a solution. So so you just gave us kind of a rundown. So let's just say that's a 2-year process. Once it's complete and you've the last part of it, do you move on? Like, does your manager or your boss say, all right, now this is a new project we have, or do you kind of manage and babysit that project you just took care of?
Well, also to clarify, I have done deals from soup to nuts in 3 months.
Okay.
And also I have done deals that have last 2 years. So anything in between.
Okay.
But you're not just focused on one deal. And when I have, my team, a small team that I have, and we're pursuing maybe 4 or 5 opportunities simultaneously. And each of them are in different phases of that life cycle. Some of them were just doing the research. Some of the other ones were in the middle of negotiations. Some of them were just doing the governance. But as I said, it's always trying to maximize the capacity of the team. And of course, there are some, I will say, stages of that life cycle that requires 100% of your attention, where your attention cannot be divided between projects. So you are maniacal pursuing that opportunity. And there are others which you maybe take 10% of your time. Like, no worries, there's only a quarterly business reviews and follow-ups, where I'm going to be only here in case something blows up or something that I have to bring back on track and things like that. And depending on also what we agree to do, right? You might be closing a deal, and the deal is something where another party, where business development doesn't have to be there, and the other party takes the ball moving forward. So there's not much there. But definitely, most of the time, the business development professional has to look proactively and always thinking with other stakeholders to see what are the opportunities to add value. So it's a role where I'm fascinated by the role, because it pushes you all the time to start thinking about growth, adding value and creating value, and doing things that the rest of the organization are not thinking about, but forces you to take a 360 view of the whole company. Because most of the time, in my case, I'm responsible for a significant amount of product in the portfolio of solution that Microsoft offers. But also I'm thinking about the trends, what's not here, what others can offer, how we can benefit, what you can learn. So you're constantly thinking and bringing ideas, but also you have three sources. So either your manager says, hey, let's pursue this, I hear about this, or you discover something, or maybe an executive comes with an idea that you want to explore. And many of the opportunities, I would say more often than not, you turn that down and say, no, we shouldn't be pursuing that.
Okay.
But yeah, it's an ongoing thing that you're always doing and thinking, and you're also pulled to multiple directions where you have to say no most of the time to be very focused on how you're creating the most impact and value. And it's not that the ideas are bad, just the resources are very, small or scarce compared to the amount of opportunity that you have. So you have to be very selective of how you can maximize your time to create the biggest impact.
So during this time, I'm curious what your day is like. Like, are you, if you had a pie and you divvied it up, is it 60% working face to face with other divisions groups? Is it Zoom calls? Is it research on your computer? Like, what does your week look like when you're deep in? I know the stages are different and maybe demand different skill sets at different times. But if someone's watching and listening and they're thinking, okay, is this a job where I'm driving around meeting with all these different groups? Or is this a job that I can sit in front of my computer and do via Zoom? Like, what does it look like?
So I have to say that I've closed deals where I haven't met the customer or the partner in person ever. So okay. In particular during COVID times, I didn't have to fly, or like it's all via Teams meeting. Microsoft, we use Teams instead of Zoom. But yeah, Zoom, Teams, or any other vehicle for doing video conferencing. And very few cases you have to meet. But definitely, I will say there are three types of activities that are in my calendar. One which is a rhythm that I keep with stakeholders internally in Microsoft. So I have a rhythm to get insights and exchange thoughts about how the business is doing with product marketing, with product engineering, with sales. Those I will say the three key sources. But also depending on what I'm looking for, what I'm studying, I get to also meet with the field, the sellers in one region, or maybe pre-sales team, or technical engineering, or even legal. And so I keep this, I will say, rhythm internally. There's another, and I will say that's maybe 30% of my time, generally speaking, of me and my team. And then there's another, I will say, big portion of my time, Dirk, that I spend it, I will say, meeting external parties. It's just getting external outside, so signals from the market, where maybe I was, at one point meeting also in a quarterly basis and monthly basis, venture capital firms, private equity firms, to see where the funds were invested. There's a saying that said, if you want to know what's happening, follow the money. So where these venture capital firms and private equity investment were, investing, or where startups were raising money, what were the new technologies. So that was a big thing that I was building relationships to get those, I will say, digital signals from the market. And there's another third, I will say, of my time where I was, dedicated to the specific partnership that I was driving. So that's sort of how I will say my day-to-day was divided. Okay. And so 1/3, just to wrap up, 1/3, I will say, is external audiences and customers and, the specific deal. And the other one, internal and external signals and getting feedback and watching trends and opportunity to add value.
I would think that if you're not a social person, or maybe you're an introvert, or you don't like people, this might not be an area that you would excel in. Is that a correct assumption, or am I off on that?
That's a very good question. For your audience, I think they can benefit from this. When I look for maybe somebody that I want to bring to my team, the ideal candidate will have, I will say, 4 key traits or experiences. Definitely the first one is being a seller, being somebody who can understand the pain point from the customer and translate that into a solution. So having the sales mindset, and not just in the personality of being an extroverted. You can be an introverted, and that's fine, I have known very successful business development professionals that are introverted. So that's not, I will say, a cause for you to rule out exploring the business development profession. But definitely what, in my opinion, is something that is very powerful and will make a business development professional very successful is more the grit, the satisfaction of achieving a goal. There are some people who tend more to be, I would say, operational and more inside and not so much going out there and relating or achieving a goal. That's what I call the seller mindset. The second one is knowing how to build things. So the mentality of creating new value and creating new products, new solutions. So that's key. And I see business development professionals who are very successful when they know how to have that mindset or have the instinct or that curiosity, intellectual curiosity of creating new value, of when you put pieces together, when you develop something that doesn't exist, or taking something from a lower value to a higher value. And that entails, how to work with engineering to see how engineering can develop a product or a solution. The third thing is knowing the execution of how to take that solution to market, right? Because it's not just about creating something and then, okay, how do you get to the customer or through the partners? So you have to understand how to sell to, sell with, and sell through, which are the three ways that you can leverage a sales go-to-market strategy. How you put that in the hands of the final customer or a partner who can add value and then take it to another party, which is the end customer. Yep. And fourth, I will say, is also the negotiation trade, the sitting down with another party and how you defend the value, but also how you demand and how you negotiate those terms, the give and gets, the hustle, and understand, not just, you don't have to be a lawyer, but understand risk and how to take the most out of the relationship without harming the other party. That's what I call more a win-win solution, where you might be finding or achieving, maximizing the value of the entire, I would say, group of parties who are coming together in a partnership. That might be two or more parties. How do you add and how you maximize the value on those different parties? Those are the four traits I will say that a good professional in business development should have.
Really great explanation. So somebody coming out of, say, a master's or college, university that's interested, how do they get into this world? Because maybe it takes, you've been in the business a long time. It's taken you probably, you've honed your skills over the course of years. Somebody that doesn't have the life experience that you have, how do they get it?
Great question. And I'll say the natural progression, Dirk, it's starting with sales.
Yep.
When you start in sales and understanding how you can take the value proposition of a product or a solution and then connect that to the pain points of your customer. And of course, starting with the end customer first in mind. You go to a customer and know, like, hey, this is what I have to sell to you. You don't start with that. You start with, let me see if I can help you, because I don't know if you can help the customers. You have to first understand what are the customer pain points and what are those needs, and then turn around and say, does my organization have something that we can offer that can put together to serve those needs? Sometimes you have to walk away and say, I'm sorry, but yeah, your needs cannot be fulfilled or cannot be met, but the portfolio of product that I represent, or let me bring somebody else, or let me suggest that you look in this direction, but not me, right? So that's, I will say, the natural career path, starting with sales, understanding that, and then evolving from there to understand the full cycle of sales. So once you're in sales, you can then naturally understand, okay, how products are being developed, how you take a product down to the customer, and then just cover the four aspects that I said. But naturally, everybody start with sales or should start with sales. Some people start and they go straight into business development. They start shadowing others, and maybe they start doing more clerk work and supporting others and watching. But it's, one thing is, seeing and hearing, and the other thing is you doing it, right? and being in those shoes first. I think people might think, well, no, I just want to go straight to business development. So, like, you might, but it'll be slower and you won't have that experience, your own first party experience, as opposed to maybe take a little bit longer and then understand first how you sell, how you negotiate, how you transact, how you quote, how you manage other relationships like partners and third parties to assemble that solution, and being in customer facing before you go into business development. So that'll be my advice and what I have seen over time.
I love it. So give me one thing. I mean, you've thrown out a lot of really interesting things we could talk about, but I'm curious, like, just getting to know you. What is it? Is there one thing that you just love about your career in being in technology and biz dev? Is there one thing that sticks out?
I will say, let me go with two, even though you're asking me one, but there are two things that stick out.
Give me three. I don't care. Just give me a couple. Yeah.
I'll go in with three.
All right.
The first thing that I'm more passionate about is coaching. So I don't see myself doing doing a role that is individual contributor without having a team. And even though I am an individual contributor, one thing that produces me most of my satisfaction is being a witness when someone achieves something that they wouldn't have thought that they could achieve before. So when I work in a business development, or I will say a career development path with someone, could be someone in my team or somebody in a different org in the company, or somebody even outside the company that I know through a friendship. When I get with that person and I set goals that person say, oh, there's no way I can achieve that, and then we work through it as a North Star and say, okay, let's say that you won't achieve that, but let's move towards that direction to see how far you can go. And then over time, seeing the satisfaction of that person and the surprise, and seeing that person resetting their expectation at a different level because they had achieved something that they thought they wouldn't ever achieve. That's I will say, the thing that produces me most of my satisfaction.
I love it.
The second thing is when I'm able to put a team together and build a solution that didn't exist. So creating new value and then meeting customer needs after I have already understood and translated all that I hear, which might be a lot of noise from the customer, and you hear a lot of suffering and pain points and discomfort, and you see the delta expressed between what they're looking for and where the status quo is. And then, okay, let's define where you want to go and start dreaming about the art of the possible, and then coming with a solution that help them take there. I love it. I love it, which is pretty much, being a translator between, two parties trying to achieve value and create value. That I love that. And I will say the third thing is just being always constantly pushing yourself and try to see my greatest satisfaction of all what I do personally and professionally is try to always see what's new, what's the latest, how I can push myself to be more effective, how can I drive growth. So all that rumbling all the time that I'm always asking myself and challenging my team. Those are the three things I will say that like my life every day.
I can tell why you're such a good parent, because all those things to me are part of parenting,
They are, yep.
So I want to get into, okay, so Jorge is an immigrant, moved from Venezuela. And my question really is about the lens that you have that maybe many who are watching right now or listening don't have. I think, I don't know, was it Florida? I'm not sure exactly where you came first, but is there something that you can go back and put your finger on that like was very different? Like maybe a lens that you have that I might not have, just coming from a different country?
Sure, yeah. So just for clarity for your audience, so I am raised and born in Venezuela, and so I moved here in 2007 here to the U.S. And I brought my family, and half of my family from my dad's side, they were born and raised here in Florida. And when I say here in the United States, but down in Florida, now in the Seattle area. But so when I moved here, and always comparing, let me take back, but since I was a kid, all the movies that I will watch were in English. I was always curious about, there's something else, there's something bigger and outside, and it might be different. And I don't know if that's better or worse, but it's different. And I was always curious. So my really that I would say attraction or interest to learn, that curiosity, intellectual curiosity to learn what was the source of something that is bigger than where I was living, start being ignited when I was a scuba diving instructor. So I started taking classes as a diver. And of course, all the books that I was reading were in English, all the movies by that time, all the videos. And so I was intrigued, and all the sources of those inventions of new equipment were coming from somewhere else. So I was curious always about that. And I never received like formal, I would say, English classes. And it was like, I need to learn that. I need to be part of that. I need to be closer to that. So I always had that, I would say, warm inside me, that rumbling in my head. And things in Venezuela growing up, they start, I would say, deteriorating. Political situation, social situation that your audience can quickly Wikipedia and Google and search if you want to know about that. But my background was coming from, I'll say, a country that was not doing great, and it was, getting worse by the minute. So I was interested to explore something new. And of course, also my personality. So I was working on these big firms that were international. So I used to travel. I was in Hewlett Packard, in Walt Disney. And so all this company gave me the opportunity to be exposed also to networks and getting to know people from different places all around the world, because all these company has offices in most of the countries, if not all. And my personality was very outgoing. And one day, somebody from headquarters in Microsoft said, "Why don't you come to work with us?" And my family was like, "No, how come? All my family's here. Let's stay here." But things were getting worse and worse until I agreed with my wife that we should be just taking a chance and seeing how that looks like. So she made me even sign an agreement that we wouldn't move more than 3 years outside. And it's been 17 years now. Now we have been living abroad. And we have given my kids opportunities that I don't think, they would have had we stayed in Venezuela. But now going to your specific audience after providing the background is that when I came here, the first thing that I noticed that my greed, my ambition, like after having been exposed to all these resources and all these opportunities and tools that I didn't have when I was in Venezuela, I brought the creativity. And I noticed that most of the immigrants coming from not only underdeveloped countries, but also any other place, even more developed countries. But when you come to a different place, the mindset that you bring is like, how do I take the most out of what I have right now? And not only immediate, but you start with that creative mindset. Like, how do I, you start with that curiosity. And it's like, how do I tap into more value? How do I take the most out of this opportunity? How do I network? Your brain, your mindset expands to ways that otherwise, had I stayed in Venezuela or hadn't I moved, even if I was raised here, when you don't move and you don't explore or you don't compare, you're not benchmarking, in a more global world, you're limiting yourself. And I see, when you look to the sides, I see people who have that background be more successful in the end. So that's one of the key things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. Would you say a lot of your success, maybe part of it at least, stems from your upbringing?
I will say my success, if I were to guess and do a self-assessment, come from three aspects. The first one is, that being exposed to something bigger and my curiosity to tap into a world that is bigger than my source. That was one thing. The other one was just being exposed to very close families where they went through bankruptcy and crisis. And of course, in Venezuela, there's very hard to plan, to budget, to imagine going through 300% devaluation or hyperinflation. So it's very hard to plan for that. So when you come to a place that is more stable, you bring that grit, that ambition, and that's also a key success. But also, it's the experience of what I have seen in my surroundings of maybe people failing, but also people being very successful that I have used as a benchmark to push myself.
Okay. I love it. As we wind down, there's a couple key things I always ask my guests that I don't want to forget with you.
Sure.
And not specific in terms of like one of them is compensation, but not like what you make or whatever. But when you're in the world of biz dev, is that typically a salaried position? Is there a bonus based off how, let's just say you take something from here to here? Like how are people typically compensated at a higher level in biz dev?
So that's very important to know for your audience. So business development, most of the time, again, when you're not within the product management or you're not in sales, which I said at the beginning of your show, Dirk, on purpose, deliberately, you're not compensating by the amount of sales that you drive for two reasons. One, you want to have always a long-term view. And secondly, you don't want to sacrifice short-term wins for the long-term growth of the company. And the other one is it's very hard to measure, right? Because if you want to take, 2x or 10x or 100x, where's the bar? Where are the threshold that typically you compensate variable to someone in business development? So most of the compensation, you have a base and then you have a variable, but the variable is not like a quota that you have to achieve, even though you have sales target or you have target that you impose yourself. It's not like you were a seller. But yeah, most of the time you have a ceiling, which is unlike being an entrepreneur and having your own company.
Okay. And as far as like the life behind it, I know you're a very involved dad. I know you like to scuba dive. I know we've talked about meditation, working out. Do you feel like this is a career that allows you to have a good balance?
Well, the word balance it's very interesting. I have my own philosophy that I can share with your audience, which is like, I don't believe in work-life balance.
Okay.
I believe that your life has work and you have to be able to learn to work in something you're passionate about. So if you're passionate about what you do, you won't see that as oh my gosh, I have to work 9 to 5, or I cannot work more than 14 hours. It'll be fine working on a Sunday if you have a global role, which I have done, because maybe my customer is in a country that they work on Sundays, as I recently had, right? So I had to work on Sundays because for them, they don't work on Fridays, they work on Sunday. Or maybe the time zone, when you have a global role, you have customers everywhere. And I'm like, recently I was working with a customer who was, 13 hours different. So for me, Sunday was their Monday and their Saturday was my Friday. So we will take turns. But what I believe is that there are some non-negotiables that I have for myself. And it's like, I have to work out, and I carve out and I block time to work out. I have to spend certain time in certain events with my family. So I need to have that flexibility to carve out from my working environment and my schedule those personal or individual commitments, either because I need to do it for myself or I wanted to do it because I wanted to be with my family.
Yeah. So you said something like, if you have a global role for the audience, you have to be aware and willing that maybe some of your Sunday nights or, whatever, I mean, maybe it's not a 9 to 5 kind of gig. You have to be willing and able to kind of work different types of hours.
That's right.
Yeah. So if you couldn't be in technology and you couldn't be in biz dev, let's just say it was off the table. Is there, you have a lot, that's one of the things I like when we were hanging out and talking recently. You have a lot of interest and we have a lot of mutual interest. Is there a dream job that if you could do anything, and I ask this, Jorge, I ask this question of all my guests, just because it gives us a different insight into, you. And sometimes I'm very surprised and sometimes I'm not. But is there something like you dream about doing?
Yeah. So I have to share with the audience that my career was more led by what I saw my dad. You know, I'm a civil engineer because I saw my dad being a civil engineer. I saw him successful. But believe it or not, the trait that he had, it was more a relator. You know, the way that he built the relationship, the networks, he was a natural seller. And I took that, and I think maybe I inherited that. But and that's why, even though I was a civil engineer and I did then my master's degrees in finance and marketing, something that I'm very passionate that if I had a magic wand and I can choose, you know, how to start over, I wouldn't have taken maybe the path that I am right now. I would have taken, I will say, a path where I could be, I will say, a personal finance educator, in particular targeting young adults. I think one of the things that are missing a lot, it's how do you manage your own finances. And that's something that is not being taught at school or even in the university, even though you're doing microeconomics and you're doing an economics or an administration degree, you know, they're not teaching nowadays exactly how you build wealth, how you become financially independent, how you manage your day-to-day finances, how do you save, how do you invest, what's a liability, what's an asset. So the average kid today, they don't receive that. And once they realize that that's something that is missing, it's too late. So I would love to be, I will say, a trainer and educator had I started again. And the other thing that I will teach alongside with that one is more the spiritual side. How do you drive self-awareness? How do you have self-awareness of your emotions, which I think is critical for anyone to discover their genius side, right? Their likes, their interests, but also the dislikes. So I'm always telling my kids, you know, be conscious about your breathing, be conscious about your heartbeat, be conscious about how your emotions are all the time. And the more that you're conscious and self-aware, the more that you can identify what lights you up, but also what drains energy from you. So you can be more always conscious, looking for the things that fire you versus the things that you know, take you down. That's what I would have done.
I love it. I agree with you. I think that's very much needed. I was thinking maybe you're going to have a wellness retreat / scuba diving place in the Cayman Islands or something
Believe it
like
or
that.
not, that's in the bucket list. Yes. Yeah.
With Joe Dispenza come in to talk, something like that.
Totally. You know, believe it or not, Dirk, I always tell my wife, if I haven't met you, I will be maybe in Bonaire, one of those islands in the Caribbean, just like barefoot all the time, teaching how to scuba dive and maybe having a village or a little shack where I can host, you know, retreats. Yeah, definitely.
I love it. I could see it. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with as we wind this down as far as, I mean, you've thrown out a lot of really good information, but you understand that this is an audience that's looking, struggling. We both have kids that are probably trying to figure out what the heck they want to do. Any advice that you would give to them, just kind of to maybe help identify a clearer path that's maybe more in alignment with who they are?
Oh, totally. I will say, I want to tell my kids, and I always remind myself all the time, is, you know, life is short, and working is going to be a big portion of your life. So you better choose what you're really passionate about. And to me, it's the secret formula are two things. One is that self-awareness. Exactly. If you try to read your body and your mind to see how you behave when you have different experiences, so you can identify what type of person you are. And each of us are different. So I will tell your audience is focus on yourself, look inside you, and always assess yourself, how your body reacts, how you're excited, how your mood is excited, how you're shining versus maybe how you're doing something that, oh my gosh, take you down. That's the first thing that I will say. And secondly, the advice for your audience will be, aside from that self-awareness, will be, I'm going to quote a very famous author, Dwayne Dyer. Yep. And I think Dwayne Dyer says two things. One is, the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So very interesting, which is pretty much the attitude that you have in front of the things. So the attitude that you have is more important than what's in front of you, and that creates a different experience for yourself. But also the other thing that I wanted to call out about him is life is about a match game. It's playing matching. What does that mean? Well, to be successful, you have to match four things. You have to match your background and your experiences, because all that baggage, even though say, oh, I'm 21 years old, I don't have much experience. Yes, you do. If you look at yourself, you have already accumulated certain experiences. You already know something about you. You have already been exposed to some certain activities in education, etc. So that counts. And that's a moving target, because every day that's going to be accumulating and that's going to be changing. The second thing that you have to match with those backgrounds and experiences, what you like. So, and I just talk about that. But then also you have to match those two things with the third one, which is where do you want to go? So you have to take the reins of your life. Don't let yourself being followed by the rest, but take the reins. You're the captain of your soul. So make sure that you make those decisions thoughtfully, where you want to continue being developed, or what are those things that you want to continue pursuing. And those three things, you match them with an environment. So for example, making it real. If you want to be a surfer, you have surfed your life and you like surfing and you want to continue now surfing big wave, you cannot be living in Texas, right? So if you enjoy the sunset, you cannot live to the east. So there are things that you have to put in coherence. They have to be cohesive, and they have to be in harmony. They have to be aligned, and you have to always, every day, look for that alignment.
Yeah, that's really, really good. I wish some of my podcasts like that, I wish I heard that when I was 22, 23. I think sometimes people young adults don't think like that. And maybe because it doesn't feel safe, they're chasing money, or they're chasing a direction that looks and sounds good. But I think that's really great advice. And I think it's a great way to end it. So Jorge, I really appreciate it. It was an honor to interview you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.